Death is a constant thought throughout every single soul that lives and breathes. The mere mention of it sends chills down the spine, a constant reminder of the mortal soul of this plane, and one that chases after you every single day of your life, as you age and as you suffer throughout every major great pain that exists in the world. And that is the case in such films like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. In a film that manages to surpass its predecessor in every aspect, the greatest part comes from the fact that death itself is manifested into a physical form, similar to the depictions of the Grim Reaper, where we witness a cat that has used 8 of its 9 lives, and now death comes for it in the form of a wolf with a distinct whistle that fills your soul with dread every time you hear it. Chasing after what needs to be done by the actions of one careless pussy. Discussing death in Puss in Boots really brings to light about the main themes of the movie about learning and growing from your mistakes, and learning to accept that to move on to better yourself. It's Puss's meeting with death that floods him with his dread from his own actions to try to avoid it at all costs, seeking that wish to restore everything back to normal before he is even able to meet his own demise at the hands of death. And it's also the way that they portray death that elevates it to a whole nother level, being that in the literal sense rather than other ways as described here.
And I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or theoretically or in any other fancy way. I'm death, straight up.
It's just that the thought that he is here and he seeks to claim something that has been wasted throughout the life of Puss, using 8 of his 9 lives, and that is something that people can relate to their own life. To virtually waste it and to have death come knocking at your door finally, that you could wish you could have done things differently before it came. The fear of regret and anxiety you gain from it, to the avoidance of discussion of those around you. Death in the film is always face to face with Puss alone. There is rarely anyone else in the scenes rather than those two, putting on this personification mainly in his own head, similar to the fact of how people would deal with the thought of death when they're most vulnerable, that being alone where the world grows darker and colder between you and the Grim Reaper himself. And when you hear that whistle, you can feel the hairs stand up on the ends not only when you see Puss on screen, but also to yourself. You yourself are getting those same goosebumps because you know what this means for Puss, because just like him, you are fighting to have him out of the picture as soon as possible, mainly by the means of avoidance, because it will eventually come for us all. We see here by his skills when we first meet Death, when Puss thinks he's just a mercenary, that he is definitely very skilled and very good at what he does, so the only option he has is to hide out of sight from him in a safe space, to try your best to focus on the goal at hand, where 2 other groups seek to find the same thing, all with different ideals and such, but still pointing to that same very center, all of which relate to life. Either you see it with Goldilocks trying to find a family, or Jack Horner just trying to be the baddest, most powerful out of them all, the master of magic, and then back to Puss again, who seeks to restore his own life, the one thing that everyone wants above all. Each encounter with death increases his fear, from where he first started out being carefree with so many lives left to live. At least that was the case in his mind until he himself experiences his 8th death that forces him to see this perspective. And despite every escape from those previous encounters with death, the walls are just only getting thinner for him. After all, for Death himself, he is actually content with most people dying naturally, while as in the case of a cat with 9 lives, his impatience actually grows for those who are wasteful and still managing to live and breathe on the planet. Coming when he sees they have wasted their opportunities. The perfect villain that you cannot stop. In some cases, you can see that he's actually not the villain. He's the personification of the inevitable fate that all characters meet. Villains are usually stoppable, where he is in fact not. He comes for all instead of just one. His goal is simply trying to take the souls from the deceased and nothing more, and to see someone just live like that and come out of scot-free when others are clearly incapable of doing so is an insult to him. The first encounter Puss has is to put his mind into fear, outclassing him and forcing Puss to retire. The second one is to reveal the inevitability of the situation, making him remember his past lives that showed his own arrogance of his ways that brought him closer to death in the first place. and the third and the final one is to finally have him trapped to accept his fate. The final scene where Puss is so close to his wish on the wishing star, only to have death trap him in this ring to fight him, where he finally gets to learn his lesson to value such life. One that death actually relents, knowing that Puss would never be able to defeat such a thing in the first place, and gives him that wish because he learned the value of such lessons. Death in this very scene is shown here that is truly a force of nature, only doing things because that is the way life is made, the natural order that makes up the universe we inhabit. He may appear as an opposing threat to the protagonist of the movie, one that you can hope be stopped, and one that shows attributes of a terrifying villain, a sinister, threatening, opposing individual wielding things like twin sickles and summoning rings of fire that makes him a god above all. But all of that is only to uphold the natural order of things, and in those ways, he is absolutely the perfect villain that cannot be stopped. But when you try to do your absolute best to do so because you are fearing for yourself, the most vulnerable part in your entire life that you can have, where you are fighting a battle you have virtually no chance of winning, way less than zero, might I add. And it's not just that he's great physically on screen, but off screen as well. That is in the mind of Puss, constantly alongside the plot, because after all, he is technically everywhere in every movie, always in the back of your head, and that's something you can never get out, especially when he's not there visually, but always there spiritually for the entire film. And that is truly a great testament at how good the film really is at doing so, with all of its visuals, the story, the acting, everything about it. And its message about death is truly a powerful one that is both mature and easy for kids to digest, and one that adults can really learn to love. Puss in Boots really showcases its power to be enjoyed by all, and serves as a great reminder to cherish the life you have and try to make the best out of it before death finally meets you face to face. With that said, I'm all done. Goodbye.